Yo, what's up guys? You got pokeaim here, and today we're going to be having a video comparing Tapu Bulu with Grassy Surge to Rillaboom, which now has its hidden ability, which is also Grassy Surge. I have my buddy Finchinator with me. He's really close to 2,000 subscribers, and he does a lot of competitive content, so if you guys like that sort of thing, which, I mean, I'm assuming you do, go ahead and check out his channel. The link is down below. Finch, why don't you actually start us off with just the typings of the Pokemon and compare about how like Grass Fairy versus pure grass makes a huge difference.
So in my eyes, Tapu Bulu with the Grass Fairy typing that was introduced last generation has a ton of things going for it. For example, being able to resist fighting and dark attacks is great, but on top of that, dragons, which are very fierce Pokemon in the metagame, being immune to that, so you could come into like a Draco Meteor or a Dragon Claw, you know, from a ton of common Pokemon, then all of a sudden taking no damage is huge, whereas Rillaboom's taking neutral damage from that. That's pretty big. Of course, there are some differences. For example, you're going to be taking super effective damage from steel type attacks and even more from poison type attacks, which 4 times effective, so they're probably going to kill you. There are some downsides, but ultimately the pros very much outweigh the cons in my eyes. So while both are good Pokemon, Bulu's typing just kind of is a big point of difference.
Yeah, I think it's the natural resistances makes a huge thing. And just one thing to note, when he said was introduced last generation, I'm assuming he was talking about Tapu Bulu, not Fairy type, guys. We know it was Gen 6.
Oh, yeah, my bad.
Yeah. No, I'm just assuming you were talking about like the Grass Fairy Tapu Bulu period.
Yeah.
But, yep. So one thing to note, we're going to be comparing some sets as well and how they did in their generation, just in general too, because this one's a little bit less defining, I would say, than the previous one we did of Cinderace versus Protean Greninja. But one of the sets that was my favorite from Tapu Bulu was Choice Band because it had virtually no counters, right? You had defensive Zapdos, which was actually 2-hit KO'd by Woodhammer and outsped in by Woodhammer in grassy terrain. You had offensive Tornadus, which died with Rock. Same thing with offensive Zapdos, or just basically not max defense invested Zapdos. And then you had even steel types like max HP Magearna being 2-hit KO by Woodhammer. So that really just makes an outright power difference if you look at the previous generation versus Rillaboom this generation, which is slightly weaker. And not only that, grassy terrain is also slightly weaker. Before it was 1.5 base power, and now it's what is it, 1.3, like a life orb. So yeah. So
yeah, it's still really strong, but like it has 5 less base attack, plus the multiplier is just a little bit less. So all of a sudden, the resistances are able to come in and at least check it once or twice, whereas beforehand they were only able to come in once, maybe even not at all. So yeah. Yeah,
and I think one other thing that makes a big difference is the kind of Nidoqueen, Nidoking thing, whereas Nidoqueen can afford to run a modest nature since it's naturally more bulky, whereas Nidoking has the speed and wants to get that off. So similarly, Rillaboom probably almost always, especially on choice sets, wants to run a jolly nature because base 85 can outspeed, you know, a plethora of mons like Mamoswine, for instance, or anything around that side. Even a Togekiss, which obviously it does resist your Woodhammer, but a choice band Woodhammer coming off of an offensive Togekiss will do, it's a 2-hit KO. So
easily,
yeah, especially with rocks up. So that's just something to note. Like Bulu can on choice band sets get away with running Adamant and will get away with running Adamant, especially because of its natural resistances, whereas Rillaboom does not. But one thing to compare on choice band sets is that Bulu has rock coverage, which is something that Rillaboom is currently lacking. So Stone Edge will allow you to deal with Volcarona, which is something we expect to be very dominant or prevalent, whatever, when the DLC comes out. And another big thing is the fact that Rillaboom has access to knockoff and U-turn on its choice band set. So not only can it get rid of items from your opponent and at least help out teammates, but also get on out of there, which will make it pair better with Hawlucha, we feel.
Yeah, that's great. But also one thing, a new Pokemon that could potentially, well, both these, if Bulu ever comes to Generation 8, would be Corviknight. And getting a knockoff on Corviknight could have such like great implications in a longer drawn-out game, which happens a lot because the metagame is how it is. So knockoff on Rillaboom is kind of one of the main things that it has over Bulu, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing I wanted to note is that, what was it real quick? Hornleech, that's it, Hornleech. So one thing about Bulu is that even whether it's a choice set or a more defensive set, which we'll be getting into in a sec, Bulu has reliable recovery in its signature move, Hornleech. It recovers 50% of the damage dealt. So not only is it recovering from the damage dealt, it's also recovering from the grassy terrain. It's also recovering potentially from leftovers. It's running a healing item, and just so that makes a big difference when it comes to that versus Rillaboom's signature move and drum beating, which lowers speed. Now lowering speed is pretty nice on a choice band Pokemon, because a Pokemon that comes in on you, for instance, let's say the Pokemon was Tornadus, right? And you went for Drum Beating. And let's say they're an offensive Tornadus and Stealth Rocket up. So you could 2-hit KO them with Drum Beating, and because you actually lower their speed, you'll be able to outspeed them the second time and knock them out. So that's like a really nice thing. Also, just in general for any resistances coming in. So that's definitely a point to Rillaboom for that. But I think that Horn Leech has a lot more utility outright, right? Whereas you can plan games with Drum Beating. So, okay, I'll lower the Dragapult's speed if it's not running Clear Body, and that'll let my next Pokemon that comes in be able to beat it. Bulu just kind of does its own thing for itself.
Yeah, and I mean, both have their pros and cons, but in my eyes, Bulu just kind of hones in on a little more consistency with Horn Leech, and also has increased survivability. And honestly, the combination of Horn Leech and Grassy Terrain low-key makes it way more bulky than you could imagine.
Exactly. Its ability to beat its counters with that. We'll actually get into the next set if you want to talk about the Swords Dance Horn Leech Protect set a little bit, and like what it did in the last generation.
Sure. So last generation, there was actually a trend of specially defensive Swords Dance Tapu Bulu, which was great against things like Tapu Koko and Ash Greninja, especially since a lot of them ran spikes over Ice Beam. And it was really cool to not only check them defensively, but also you come in on a resisted Thunderbolt or a resisted Dark Bolt, so you get a Swords Dance up, and then all of a sudden, +2 Horn Leech and Grassy Terrain is going to be doing plenty to things like Zapdos, which we talked about before, but also now you're slower. So if they roost, you're doing neutral damage, and you're doing well over 50% to +2. So you win that 1v1. You're also able to beat things like Clefable, which can come in and it's like, oh, it's defensive, so it can't beat me, but then you set up and you beat it with ease. So it's just a really great adaptive Pokemon, kind of making Tapu Bulu really versatile. And seeing as something like Rillaboom doesn't have access to Horn Leech, it can use Swords Dance plus Drum Beating with, say, Drain Punch, but it doesn't hit the same. It doesn't abuse Grassy Terrain quite as well. So I think that kind of lets Bulu's viability transcend beyond Rillaboom just a little bit. And it was a really cool dynamic of Tapu Bulu that we were exposed to last generation.
Yeah, one thing to note, he mentioned Zapdos, he mentioned Clefable. Take it up a notch. This Tapu Bulu could beat defensive Tornadus if it really wanted to. You add the chance of Hurricane missing, because it's only 70%, which is his best move, and them running no special attack investment between leftovers, Grassy Terrain, Protect, and Horn Leech recovery. You actually had a solid chance of beating Torn, and I've definitely lost. Why is the region Sydney for us? We're both in the same area. Let me change that real quick. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry, guys. I'm looking at Discord. I think it's because of my VPN. But yeah, so like you were definitely able to beat answers like that, and he mentioned Zapdos was a big one. I just wanted to name that too. Just also to note, when it came to Swords Dance sets, like we said, Rillaboom does have Drum Beating, and it is faster, you know. Another thing to know is it does have Earthquake. Now, Earthquake is weakened in terrain, but even from a choice band set, that'll still do like more to a Heat Rain, if I'm not mistaken, and a Magnezone than if it's halved, right? Because it's times 2. I don't want to quote that. Can you count that real quick for me? Because I don't want to do. It's too early to do the math in my head.
Actually, wouldn't you have you? Doesn't it get Stomping Tantrum or?
Oh yeah. High horsepower. High horsepower.
It has all of the ground moves. Yeah, high horsepower would be able to kill them with ease. So Magnezone, which is going to be coming just in about a week, you could use that and you get the kill off of it. Although Choice Band Superpower should get the kill as well. So
yeah.
It really just depends on your set, but you should be able to cover that for sure.
But if they're starting to run like those Iron Defense sets, then like that's something to know. That's something that Bulu doesn't currently have. Though we'll talk about some of the stuff it's getting with the DLC in November. But yeah, like Bulu can really just do whatever it wanted with its Swords Dance sets. And what I was going into last gen was that there were also Z moves, which made a huge difference for Bulu, allowing it to really like I forgot the name of. I was about to call it Max Overgrowth. What was it called with the Z? The grass Z move?
Oh my gosh, I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
It's been so long. It hasn't even been that long. It's just that
I want to say that Z Grass, whatever the name of the move is, was great because you're able to get so many kills. Like for example, we just talked about Clefable.
Yeah. Bloom Doom, by the way. I love how we forgot Bloom Doom.
Oh my gosh, thank you. But also, if you want to switch it up on the aforementioned bulk up or like specially defensive Swords Dance set, if you run Z Fight, you could actually also break through checks and counters like Celesteela and Mega Scizor, or kill Heat Tren in one shot, which kind of mitigates not having the ground coverage. So there's definitely a lot of practical applications of that as well.
Yeah. And then you also had Choice Scarf, which I honestly want to give the points to Rillaboom over Bulu if we're talking about Choice Scarf set.
I couldn't agree more, because U-turn especially.
Exactly, U-turn, knockoff. Now, where Bulu, like I said, does have Stone Edge, and Rillaboom, unfortunately, is lacking a rock move. When you have knockoff, U-turn, and superpower, just for that coverage and just being able to get out there, I think that's a big thing when it comes to it. And then we do have one other set I wanted to compare real quick, which is Assault Vest, which was something that Bulu ran early metagame in order to deal with Lele, in order to deal with Greninja, before people started switching over to the Swords Dance Protect sets. And I'm not sure which one to give it to more, because I feel like obviously Horn Leech makes a huge difference in terms of recovery for Bulu, and you can also use things like Nature's Madness to you know, like weaken back in the day. But like just the momentum from U-turn and recovery from Drain Punch on Rillaboom is okay too.
I think that it's kind of 50-50 split. On more offensive teams, I probably would prefer Assault Vest Rillaboom, because U-turn generates momentum and gives so many opportunities. But on both your teams, having the ability to go for something like Nature's Madness or to cover up with Horn Leech can have a lot of utility. So I really think you could justify either side. And I think both would probably be pretty superb Assault Vest users in the context of respective metagames.
Yeah, no, I could agree with that. It's interesting to think about, because the fact that Bulu is obviously not around in this metagame at the moment makes a big difference. We mentioned, or we touched upon earlier, that I feel that Rillaboom is a better partner for Pokemon like Hawlucha, because if we take the combination of last generation of Coco Lucha, Coco could U-turn and Volt Switch on Pokemon coming in, allowing Hawlucha to get in, get its Electric Seed, get its Unburden, Swords Dance up. Whereas Bulu plus Lucha was ran, but it's obviously not as easy to get in the Hawlucha on those turns, because you have to play your turns right with your grassy terrain, and obviously there was the fact that a lot of Mons had terrain, like all the Tapus had terrain. They were all OU. They were all, you know,
you can redirect terrain in a pinch.
Exactly. Whereas with Rillaboom, you just U-turn out and you get in Hawlucha and you can get your thing. So I want to give that slightly to Bulu in that scenario. And then the last thing is, obviously they both had bulk up, and they both had access to Leech Seed. Leech Seed Protect sets were sometimes used on Bulu, and I think Rillaboom can do a sub seed a little bit better just because of its fast speed tier.
Yeah, it's quicker, and also it has higher base HP, which could come into play, although Bulu does make up with it with higher defenses, so that's kind of a trade-off. But having, I believe, 10 base higher speed can go a long way, because it can substitute against Pokemon that are in the middle of it. Like you mentioned Gyarados before. Mammoth's one that's choice banded and locked into, say, Icicle Crash.
Yeah.
You come in, you can scout that out, yeah. So there are definitely ways around that.
Yeah, but if we have to talk about this generation, obviously there would be a nerf for Bulu. Again, the grassy terrain is nerfed slightly. However, there are some big buffs to Bulu's moveset. And do you want to just talk about like 4 moves that it gets that, well, maybe like you said, Darkest Lariat is not as great, but do you want to talk about the other ones that it does get?
It does get Darkest Lariat, which could be cool. It had a couple of things, but more importantly, it gets Stab Flare Up, which is just amazing. It lets you kill dragon types, for example, which currently resist grass moves like Wood Hammer and Horn Leech, and only a couple of them are really minding superpower. So that's great. You get things like Latios and Latios if they ever come back, and you're able to kill Hydreigon in one hit without having to predict with a fighting move that's not stab. But speaking of fighting moves, you don't have to risk superpower dropping your defense anymore, as now you can, well, dropping your attack anymore. Sorry. As you get close combat, which does drop your defense still, but you would rather prefer maintaining your attack stack because you're an attacker, and also just like going for that into, say, Ferrothorn, you can go for that, and then you could use another attack without being reduced, so that's cool. And last but not least, much like Rillaboom, it also gets high horsepower, which can get you the kill on something like Heatran or Magnezone once they're all out in the metagame, so that's cool as well. Yeah,
though again, close combat is going to do a ton, if not knock them out from a choice bet. So I think this just really buffs Bulu, because as Finch was mentioning, we needed to use Woodhammer in terrain to really damage our answers. It's funny because like the resisted move was the one that was doing the most to everything, bar Heatran, right? Bar Heatran, the resisted move.
I mean, it felt like we were using a Tinted Lens Pokemon almost with grassy terrain and how powerful it was.
Yeah, that's a really good way of doing it, because it didn't care about your resistance. I like that. But Play Rough just makes a huge difference. That's a 2-hit KO, you know, on Zapdos. That's an OHKO on Tornadus after rocks. But not to give this thing too much over over Rillaboom. I do want to note that in this generation we also have the heavy duty boots item, so that does make a difference. A lot of Bulu's KOs and 2-hit KOs were because rocks were so prevalent, and they were like, I mean, the defoggers that had to come in had to take rocks, right? Zapdos and Tornadus.
It was really great in the metagame because you could pair it with a Stealth Rocker that did good against defoggers like Garchomp or Heatran, and those Pokemon were able to synergize super well with Bulu. But now with heavy duty boots being common on pretty much anything weak to Stealth Rock, that is going to give it a lot more opportunities to be checked, especially without Z-moves.
Yep, I think it makes a big difference. And again, Z-moves being gone makes a huge difference too. There are, again, Dynamaxx moves depending on the metagame that you're playing, if they're allowed or not, which I'm not even sure which one I would actually give in that scenario, right? Like, does Bulu learn a flying type attack that can give it, you know...
I don't think it learns bounce, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think it learns any flying type attack either. Though the lack of hidden power also makes a difference. There's actually a few Pokemon that I specifically ran into, specifically on the ladder. Like hidden power poison Alakazam was something that...
Oh my god, that's funny.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, if you really wanted to be a little more woke, a couple people used Scarf Bulu with hidden power fire for Kartana themselves, which is honestly hilarious.
Yeah, so like, just to show you guys an example, so that definitely does hurt and help. More help, I think, than hurt.
More so help than hurt, definitely.
Yeah, but if we want to talk about things that Rillaboom will be getting with Sword and Shield DLC, it does get, I think it's called Grassy Glide or Grassy Glider, whatever it's called, and apparently in terrain, it's like a priority move. So that's like the translation I understood of it. I could be wrong, and please let me know down in the comment section down below. But that could be really cool on Swords Dance offensive sets and helping Rillaboom deal with Pokemon that might want to come in and, you know, check it, but just because maybe they necessarily can't take a hit, like maybe like a 30% Hydreigon can come in and go for Flamethrower or something, or like a Terrakion, right? If you're at 30% yourself.
You want to kill a Terrakion or a Keldeo, then all of a sudden you get that kill for free, and that could carve out a totally new niche for Rillaboom, which would definitely be interesting to explore. Exactly,
and obviously that does have to do with your terrain, and I don't know how strong it would actually be, but again, just a terrain boosted move is nice. Like if it's even 60 base power, you know, that's okay at +2 with the boost, because that's essentially stronger than, you know, most 60 base power priority moves we go for right now. I mean, a lot of mons use 40 base power priority moves. You got Aqua Jet and things like that. So just to keep in mind, that could be a really big plus. But overall, yeah, what would you say has the advantage? I think we kind of led to it the entire time.
I think that it would have to be Bulu, both offensively and defensively. Offensively, it has higher base attack, and it got a whole new plethora of coverage options, which can go a long way. And defensively, the fairy typing just grants it so many resistances and a very important immunity that overwhelm the negative of having the steel weakness in my eyes and the poison 4x weakness. So yeah, Bulu is just the more well-rounded Pokemon in my eyes, but Rillaboom with the greater speed and potential new moves that we're yet to know everything about could potentially have a little bit of a comeback in its own right. So let's wait and see.
Yeah. And again, also adding on to that, like Horn Leash just makes a huge difference for both offensive and defensive. But again, we don't know what's going to happen with Rillaboom, but I do think that if you want to use like something with Unburden, something with a Grassy Seed, I think Rillaboom is the better Pokemon, specifically because of U-Turn, just being able to get that in. Like they bring out their Ghost type or their Steel type or whatever on Rillaboom's U-Turn. And even like something like a Drifblim could become scary with Calm Mind, Scram Sap, you know, in lower tiers. So just to keep that in mind. But yeah, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to check out Finchinator's channel. He's really close to 2,000 subscribers, so that channel link would be down below. I would love if you subscribe. There's great content. He uploaded like 30 videos the other day.
So yeah, no, I've been pretty active. I have a lot of stuff that I want to pump out there. So many cool tournaments and things to go on the ladder right now.
Got World Cup coming up soon.
Even more. Yep.
Yeah, so Finch is also on the same team as me. We're on Northeast for World Cup.
We're going to win.
Let's do our best. But yeah, also guys, if you want to pick up my Drop a Draco merch, my OG Drop a Draco merch, it is available. Link is down below. 100% to charity. So feel free to pick that up. Teespring's also matching 100% to charity as well. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.